part.
Chef.
I haven't had a deep dish pizza, by the way.
I haven't either. And my office is here. I'm up here all the time, and I still haven't had a deep dish. Yes.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Alex Williams, founder and editor-in-chief of the New Stack. We're coming to you live here from Chef Conf in Chicago with another episode of the New Stack Makers, sponsored by Chef. Chef's comprehensive suite of automation products to manage it all: infrastructure, runtime environments, applications, and even the DevOps workflow itself. Today we're chatting with Dominik Richter,
Hello.
Senior Product Manager at Chef, and Annie Hedgpeth, Cloud Automation Engineer at 10th Magnitude. Thanks for joining us. Now let's start the show. How are y'all?
Doing really well, thanks.
Great.
Good.
Thanks so much for having us here. This is great.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a little more quiet here. We were right by where all the food was yesterday, so like people were like flipping, spinach dip with their crackers. It got pretty crowded in there. So, any case, Dominik, last year I interviewed you in Austin at ChefConf, and you know that podcast was one of the most popular podcasts of the past year.
What?
Yeah. It was
What did I say?
It was so popular, and they're like, and I thought it was one of my favorite podcasts last year. I was just fascinated by the backstory about InSpec and when it's and how you've developed it. So maybe what you could do is give us a little overview of InSpec, and we'll just start with there, and then we can talk about 2.0 and then with Annie, I'd love to hear about your uses for it, how you've been using it.
All right. Guess I'll do a small introduction. You can talk a little bit about how you're using it, and then I'm going to go to InSpec too. I would love to, because we built on some of the concepts we talked about last year.
Right.
All right. So InSpec is a tool for compliance and security testing, as well as operational testing. It came out of the world for server testing mainly because we wanted to make sure that whatever we put on our servers is actually in the state that we expect it to be in. InSpec has really started around the operating systems and traditional VMs, traditional physical servers, and we have grown into the security space at first because this is where people had the most use cases for, and now we have expanded beyond that.
Okay, and perhaps what I'd love to do is first you can tell us a little bit about what's new in InSpec, and then I'd love to hear from you about how you've been using InSpec. InSpec 2.0 is very, very new, but I know you've been using the InSpec tool that was essentially launched last year, right? So perhaps what you can do is talk about 2.0 quickly, and then we'll go into the uses for it, and then how those might evolve over time. All
right, so about a year ago, and when I talked to people a year ago, I love to point to the small issue I had in GitHub that talked about weird platform things that were coming to InSpec. And people usually looked at that as a small technical side note. But the vision behind it was that we believe that your fleet, so the computers that you have, is actually built out of network equipment, of cloud systems, of VMs, containers. It's actually very broad. It goes far beyond traditional operating systems. It's your applications and everything that you need to make that run. And that just exists in multiple layers. So with InSpec, we believe that we had a great language at our hands, a language that we can use to describe what we want from these systems. And we shouldn't just limit it to one aspect, which is the operating system, i.e. one aspect of that entire stack. We should actually use it to describe that stack. So with InSpec 2, that promise finally became a reality. When we released it together with the ability to describe AWS, Azure. We're moving into GCP, so Google's cloud, and VMware as well. All these are coming into core InSpec as well. And at the same time, like this year at ChefConf, just a day ago, we announced that we're moving into network equipment too. So the language which you use, which I use as an auditor, as a security tester, to describe what I want from my systems is actually applicable to your entire fleet now. And that's the biggest change with InSpec 2 and Automate 2 at large.
Annie, I'm curious. Tell us about 10th Magnitude. What is 10th Magnitude?
10th Magnitude is, oh man, I wish I could remember the tagline. We're an Azure consultancy. We're a Microsoft partner. And we just recently won an award, a Microsoft award. And for the life of me, my marketing person is going to hate me for not remembering what it was. But anyway, we do all things Azure. And I'm a cloud automation engineer there. And I love InSpec. I think it's a really great tool, not just because you can just use it everywhere, starting with test-driven development and, all the way to the end for compliance, And so I started out using it just in test-driven development, doing red-green refactor, on my write a failing test, or write a test, watch it fail, remediate it with Chef, and then from there, your cookbook is fully tested because you did your test-driven development, and then after that, so there's smoke testing was great. That was how I started using it, and I've used it for many clients, just doing that, just testing cookbooks. But then also, I haven't done this yet, but I'm really excited about it. I really love using Terraform, and I was doing a project about a year ago that was very heavily using Terraform, and I was saying, man, wouldn't it be so cool? It might have been more than a year ago. Wouldn't it be so cool if I could know if all of the resources that I just created were actually there, like do some test-driven development with my Terraform scripts, I was like, man, because I was using InSpec so much before that, I was like, wouldn't InSpec be great for this? Like, I wish I could know if my subnet existed, or if I was putting the right name in there, the right variable name in my, whatever. And so anyway, with InSpec 2.0, they answered all of those questions for me, and I was so extremely excited about that. And so anyway, like I said, now with our clients, we're trying to, with my current client right now, I'm trying to show them the use cases for just through the other ways, like test-driven development, and then being able to see that your resources are provisioned. And now that people are seeing how powerful it is, now we're starting to move into security compliance, which is funny because that's where it should start, right? But we kind of took a different route, probably just because of where I started with it in that particular company. So anyway, but they see how powerful it is, and now everybody wants to use it. And so
everyone wants to use it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Because it's so powerful, and it just gives you that security, not in the sense of security and compliance, but that for yourself, like as somebody who is in charge of this all, it helps you to feel like you're doing the right thing, and like you have something right there that gives you the assurance that it's built correctly. And so not only are you being compliant and being secure and everything, but it gives you peace of mind, because it just makes your life a little bit easier, makes your job a little bit easier,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Now with Terraform 2.0, you are introducing these new features, right? And one of them is Terraform now integrated with it, or what is the Terraform role?
Yes, so the Terraform feature is one of our community contributions. I'm incredibly grateful, by the way. We've got a fantastic community. We have opened InSpec to have more plugins, to integrate with other tools, to be more, to just work better in the environment that you're using.
Right.
Now, Terraform is one of those. You use Terraform to deploy your cloud stacks.
Right.
Now, the way that InSpec works there, it takes the Terraform configuration that you have, and from that, it describes all of the InSpec relevant rules for you. Like, you don't even have to do anything anymore. It creates an entire profile for you. Mm-hmm. You take the profile and you prove it out against your infrastructure. You can make sure that whatever you described there is actually in that state. Mm-hmm. So it gives you visibility, insights, assurances, security in there, not in the sense of IT security, but for peace of mind.
Yeah. Peace of mind.
How will that make life simpler for customers out there?
So,
how will it not, right? Like, it's such a powerful tool.
Yeah.
It, you just don't have to do all of that manually. And
right.
like everything, if something is broken, it will quickly find out what it is. And then you could, have a runbook or whatever that fixes it afterward. It catches things that people will not catch on their own,
Mm-hmm.
Let me put it this way. InSpec is a language for assurances and expectations. Right? You have different tools that you use in your daily life to manage your infrastructure. You've got Terraform, you've got Docker, you've got Chef, Puppet, Ansible. The stack is very, very long. What we use InSpec for is to describe what we expect the end state after all these tools run to be in. Right? It's mainly used for that. And because it doesn't do anything else besides that, it's very focused on this one use case of giving you insight and making sure that what you expect your environment to actually do is really there. And by the way, if you don't have some of these tools deployed yet, like if your automation is not as strong yet because you've just moved to a new stack, I've seen people who use InSpec at the beginning of that to find out what's actually going on in the infrastructure. And then they can use the automation to step by step take it to the new stack.
Well, and that's the best way of putting it too, is that you describe your end state, you describe what you want it to look like. And so the security and compliance team can just write the profile, the security profile that they want, saying this is how it should look like, and then see all of the failing tests, and then another team can go and make all those tests pass. And so I just love that it's describing the end state, what the desired state of what it should look like, because just defining it that way, you can see how broad that is and how many different use cases that describes. So.
And so then, and so that just provides that ease of use then that people have really been wanting. What have you historically found, with customers out there in terms of how they've been managing this manually? And is it a shift for them to try to think about it, even though it is done automatically to some extent?
Well, yeah, a lot of people will say, well, Chef is supposed to make it that way, and so like Chef is describing my end state, or we have our infrastructure as code, and like that's describing my desired state, and so why do I need InSpec or something? But things go wrong, and sometimes things aren't coded properly, and sometimes somebody goes in and changes something or whatever. You don't have that assurance until you do with InSpec. You just don't really know until you test it all, and you can be testing it continually too. If your desired state is in code as compliance as code or whatever, and you're continually testing it, then you know that it's always staying in that desired state, and so it's secure.
We really, really want to make your life easier and simpler. Now, as a typical DevOps engineer these days, right? What is your tool sprawl that you have to know? Like Chef, bit of Puppet, maybe some Ansible here and there. I don't know.
I mostly use Chef,
You got Azure
Resource Manager, PowerShell.
It gets rather broad. Terraform too, which you mentioned. It gets broad very, very quickly. So you've got a whole stack of things, and they are changing every couple of years too. We're trying to bring some sanity into this. Some levels where you can say, this is the language that I use, works across these different tools that do things to my infrastructure. But with this, like, as soon as I learn it, and the syntax is rather simple, it's meant to be simple because it's not meant to change a lot of things. It's meant to describe what is there. You get that in, and you can actually see, like, even if I'm not the expert on Azure right now, for instance, I could describe what I want certain things in Azure to be like and behave like as somebody who read a lot about cloud systems, I can start to describe these things without being the end expert in all the Azure configuration, all the tools. I don't even know where it is all at. But with something like InSpec, you can describe that and you can make sure that it's actually there.
Because you don't know the desired state, you might not know how to get it to the desired state, but you know what it should look like, and so you can write that out. Yeah.
So, do you see any change in the users out there?
I do. We started out targeting security users, mainly, like you said, too. But then we were surprised to see how the community actually takes it. And this is the wonderful thing also about open source. The community will take something like this and use it in unexpected and surprisingly awesome ways. So for instance, we've had users that have taken this purely from an operational standpoint because they wanted to find out how the infrastructure is doing. what they are running in certain brownfield environments that they haven't had any insights for in years. Like, these are the parts of your organization where you are going to say, these are where my skeletons are. I don't know what's in there. I don't want to really know. But then on some level you should. Because if you don't know, that thing doesn't change, and it might surprise you when somebody abuses it at some point. So people have used this to help them migrate from one state to another, to help gain insights into systems that they haven't used so far. We've seen it in testing. So as a developer, I'm using this to test out my code that I'm developing in the infrastructure automation space, for instance, and of course in security as well.
So who are the users then? Who are they now?
I would say it's your typical DevSecOps users, which we're targeting primarily, of course. Anybody who is a security engineer is going to use it. We have got a large community around the DevOps users, so anybody who uses Chef, Ansible, or Puppet. And we are very, very open to that too. We believe in bringing them together and describing this as something that everybody can use. And then it's slowly venturing into the application developer space. It's still something that's fairly new because application developers have their own way of doing tests. But as you're moving closer to containers and to serverless and all of that, you're seeing that some of the responsibility for security is going to move to the developers. And this is where it's going to be important to describe some of the requirements that we have as well and making sure that they're okay.
So who are you seeing as the users, and what is their level of maturity who are using InSpec right now?
Well, primarily I've seen just the DevOps engineers using it a lot because we want to be able to validate our configuration that we had just created. And so it starts out in test-driven development, and then we're using it in the pipeline to just make sure that everything is configured properly, just basic smoke testing and whatnot. But like I said, there's a groundswell, so they start thinking in terms of, who else can use this because it's so cool, and then security, or like in my current company with my current client, sometimes the teams change a lot. So somebody might have been on the DevOps team and then they moved to the security team, and then they're like, oh, there was this tool that we used over in the other team and we should use it here. And so it just grows because it's so good, and people know how powerful it is, and so they just take it to other teams, and it's kind of grassroots,
Right. Well, we're seeing the evolution of security being more part of the continuous development process, right? DevSecOps is a term that is, starting to be used more. I'm curious about the term. I mean, if you see it something people associate themselves as security people with a DevOps expertise, but I almost imagine not. It almost seems like it is much more organic than that.
Yeah, I think so too. I mainly describe the people that see themselves in the DevSecOps space as security engineers. So somebody who does security mainly for their living, but has all of the engineering skills and the DevOps skills to work with the higher degree of automation that we're in. And so I haven't heard of a person calling themselves as a DevSecOpser or something, because it's a tongue twister. I've seen a security engineer, like I'm a security hacker or something like that. Yeah.
I'm curious about what you're saying about the developer, and thinking through how the developer becomes part of this process. What is that thinking right now that you're following to be able to conceptualize this more about the developer being part of that community, that InSpec community?
Yeah, so the reason why I think that way is the evolution that we're seeing in the way that applications are being deployed and developed. So traditionally, as a developer, I would hand over my application to somebody who's going to put it on a server and then just run it, the traditional admin. Now I'm more in the space where I'm creating smaller services that I'm partially responsible for.
Right.
That are still going to be run, but the abstraction is getting different. Right? Traditionally, you had a thicker stack of the operating system below it, and then the application a little bit on top. Now you've got the application dominating it. Now, some people have taken this as a signal to say, well, if all of the rest goes away, then the security concerns are solved. That's not true. Your security concerns have moved to a different layer. And the problem is that we, as a larger community, we are now starting to tackle that, and we're starting to look at what the right way of describing that and what the expectations are for that changing infrastructure. It's just like with the introduction of cloud. When I was first in the cloud space, as we introduced it, I was asked about militarized, demilitarized zone and why my VMs are moving. They are not allowed to move. They should stay there. That was just not a reality anymore with cloud, with auto-scaling groups, where VMs come and go all the time. Now you move to containers, you move to serverless, that just gets completely blown up. And the security questions that you need to answer in this space are about the context that the applications are running in, how information moves. People are freaking out about GDPR right now, right? Because as of next Monday, GDPR is essentially enforced. That's a harsh regulatory requirement from Europe that's going to really penalize you if you don't follow it. Like, it's up to 4% of your worldwide turnover. Now, those penalties are real. And now, for that reason, people have started to look deeper into GDPR and what it means. Where your data moves becomes very, very important. And so your data moves between applications that you connect, that you describe, that you have just moved to a different layer, like containers and serverless. And the description of the security requirements on that layer need to move too. We have had compliance largely around the operating systems traditionally. Now it's time to move it forward into the new stack that we're seeing.
So when we think about this, Annie, are you seeing more developers moving into the process as Dominik describes? What are the experiences that you have that reflect on what Dominik says?
No, not yet. Not with my current client, because I've just been there for a while. But they, I think they're starting to discover it, but it's slow.
Yeah.
And so
Right. So where does InSpec go from here? What's the next evolution of InSpec?
Yeah, so we're working towards InSpec 3 right now. We'll have a small announcement in 2 to 3 weeks where we will make it public. We'll show you what's all included. There's a number of things in InSpec that we wanted to fix for a long time that we haven't gotten to, like the way that severity of controls is described, the way that controls are skipped, the layering works. There's a lot of seemingly smaller things, but that are just important in the day-to-day use. With the next major release, we'll tackle a lot of these, make it a lot easier to use, and then as we have those basically finished and InSpec moves to the next major releases, we're looking more into where some of those applications are moving and tackling those with the right set of controls. As you're saying, you're totally right. Like, we aren't quite there yet. A lot of people are still catching up with DevOps and the automation, the baselines of automation. But I want to be ready. I want to have these as descriptions for that community.
And it's a whole philosophical mind shift, like Adam was talking about in the keynote this morning, and how he even changed from the application at the base to, the infrastructure. Thinking of it in terms of the application rather than infrastructure as the base, and so like the developers, they still want to do their testing, and they don't see it as they don't see how holistic, I guess, what the way that they should be looking at it is. So
So so you've had some experience working with InSpec. And your customers are starting to, look at it more closely. What would you like to see from it? What would you like to see InSpec? If you had a wish, what are some of the things that, if you're excited about the technology itself, what would you like to see it further do?
Well, honestly, like everything that I've wanted it to do, they come out with. And so like they've caught up to what I wanted. So at first I was really wanting the Azure resources to be tested, and they did that. And then now with the Terraform integration, I think that is so really exciting. And so I'm going to start using that pretty soon as I can. And so now I just got to come up with a new idea. I don't know. They did it all. So
where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They beat me to it. So yeah.
That's actually the fun part. The more I start asking those questions myself, right, the more I'm seeing that we're really at the point where the core of the stack is there.
Yeah.
What a lot of people want are like starting to target certain systems that we don't have natively supported yet, like network equipment that's just not there yet as a resource. InSpec abstracts some of the configurations that you have on your systems away for you, and it gives you a nicer interface for that. So instead of forcing people to have regular expressions all over to find weird server configurations, we give you an interface that you can understand as a human being, and I can, for instance, interrogate my network equipment to say, what are the interfaces I'm running and who has access to these? We want to do that for more devices. We want to spread that out more. But then the next bigger step of the evolution, I can only hint at this for now, slightly, is going to be, it's going to change the way that you not just describe these things, but it's going to move closer into the way of giving you insights.
Wow.
Because it's more about insights than it is just about
we're
tests.
seeing the data analytics story emerging then.
Yes, there it is.
Yes, okay.
Cool.
I think you've been poking at that slightly since we talked last year as well.
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much about that yet, but we have been thinking about this one for a long time, and we are now at the point where it's ready to move in there and come out with.
We're starting to see concepts of observability becoming much more important. And I could envision how the concepts of observability might play into InSpec.
Yes, actually it is.
Okay.
That's really exciting. Really, really exciting.
Well, we'll be back next year then to hear more about observability potentially in InSpec. Dominik Richter, thank you very much for taking the time. Annie, thank you very much. Been here with Dominik Richter and Annie Hedgpeth, a cloud automation engineer at 10th Magnitude. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the New Stack Makers, sponsored by Chef. As always, thanks for listening, and please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts from.